Okay. Hey, Jen.
Hello.
Dr. Jennifer Johnson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Great, great. So I'm excited about the title that we chose for this stream because it so describes your experience. Like this almost defeated founder found her moxie and got a pipeline of leads, something like that. But that's what happened. So before I'm going to ask you a few questions, but before we start, what do you do and why do you do it?
So I'm a burnout mitigation consultant, and people always say, like, what is that? Like, how's that different from anything else? And basically what I do is I help organizations mitigate burnout to protect their bottom line and also to care for the people who make the bottom line possible. And that bottom line might be profitability, it might be community impact, it might be student outcomes, if you're in education. But ultimately, I help folks protect whatever that bottom line is by helping them navigate burnout in their organization. And so I like to take a comprehensive approach, meaning that like the work, there's organizational drivers and there's personal drivers. So I address both of those through a systematic experience. And I love it because I feel like I'm providing the service that I wish I had had when I experienced burnout the first time. I got my start in K-12 education and had some really challenging experiences and was really experiencing just a high level of what I now know is burnout. And I just feel like people shouldn't have to go get a PhD to learn how to research, to figure out solutions for burnout. I feel like I've done that so that other people don't have to. And I want to empower people to not have the experience that I had, to have the support in their organization and for their individual process so that they can navigate burnout.
Awesome. Thanks for that. It's just such important work. The reason I'm so excited that I love working with you and I'm so excited to interview you is because you're an example of someone who, like, when you came to me, you're an example of someone who is so smart and so good at what you do. You have a PhD. You have a PhD. You make a big difference in the organizations that you work for. And when we started working together, you had a challenge that so many entrepreneurs in your similar situation have, where you're so good at what you do, but what lacks is a sales system, because people don't really know what you do and how to get the word out. Would you describe?
Right, because I'm not trained in that. Like my training is in the content, right, and the process and how to do it, and the research and measurement, the statistics, the teaching. It's not in how to run a business or how to generate leads or how to market myself. Like that's not part of the training that I received. And so as a founder, it's been a big hurdle to try to figure out, like, how do I do the business side of what I'm so passionate about.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I have to allergies here. So and I also work with a lot of recruiters and who are really good at what they do, but they just don't have that piece. The way that we connected, I shared this as an example, actually, in a way.
I know. I was like, hey, that's me.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about, you made a post. You made a post on LinkedIn. Do you remember that? And what?
Yeah, I said basically, I'm looking for a business coach. Here's all the things I'm not looking for. I'm not looking for mindset. I'm not looking for, I just had this whole list. I don't even remember what they all were, but it's like, I'm looking for someone specifically that can help me with strategy. That is something that I can implement and have systems and all those things. And that maybe has some experience with consultants. And it was kind of crickets a little bit for about a day. Mm-hmm. And then I got a message from you saying, have you found, a business coach? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, who is this? Let me check it out. So before I even responded, I went and I looked at your LinkedIn profile, looked at your website, and I was like, ooh, I think this woman might be able to help me. So I responded and said, I kind of like gave you like a million questions and said, tell me who, here's the things I'm looking for. Tell me how you could help me with that. Have you worked with a client like me before? I really gave you a big big list of questions, but you came back with those and made a connection with me and what my business is, and then we had a call on the phone, and I was like ready. It was just a really perfect connection that I think that you were able to facilitate because you have those systems.
Yeah, and just a freebie tip, and I don't know if you're doing this now, Jen, but is the way that just little back behind the scenes is that's one of my, I use like kind of like a flywheel of sales systems that are always operating in the background. And one is searching LinkedIn for recommend, like that. In that particular case, it was recommend a business coach. And you fill in the blank for what you do. And if you put it in hashtags and search the posts, like I found you, or my team found you. That's actually my virtual assistant that I trained to do that process. And then I jumped in when we connected and you asked me all those questions. But having those systems in the background can just be just a huge game changer. So speaking of that, another reason why I love working with you and I'm so excited to interview you is because you actually executed what we talked about. Not everybody does that. So can you talk about like what, because I know, and you combined it with your other strategies, because when we first met, you were really successful at closing clients that you met in person, and you were about to speak at South by Southwest. And then you turned that more into a systematic approach. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I also want to hear about your business pivot too, but talk about that person.
Yeah. So the reason I was looking for a business coach was because, and this is going to sound weird, but I had my most successful year ever in my business, my most profitable year, the biggest revenue. And I thought to myself, oh no, I don't know how to duplicate this. I don't know how to do this again, because up to that point, where I was finding clients from was referrals. And then also from speaking. And so I would go speak at conferences, or, I would go speak at luncheons and things like that, networking events. People would see me speak. They were interested in my product or my service. And then they would talk to me and we would, have a contract. Right. And that's where all of my business had come from. And I just had this fear that what if when I go to these conferences this year and I speak at these events, the right person isn't in the room? And what's that going to do to my business? Because this is really my only strategy, is that people see me speak and they hire me, or a referral, and that felt very unsettling. And I had a lot of fear, and I was very wrapped up in fear, and I was really ready to just be like, I just need to go back to my 9-to-5. I can't do this because I just had this, like, what if I can't? It was almost, I wanted to eject to avoid even the possibility of failure, which is like, what? Such a mindset thing, right? But so that's why I was looking for a coach. And I, when we started working together, and I had this big conference coming up, and you gave me some strategies to connect with people before the conference and set up meetings and like make more of a conference, because what I was doing previously is I would just speak and people would come up and talk to me, right? I wasn't being proactive. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a business coach who could give me proactive strategies to get in the room with people, or to get online in digital spaces with people, because I didn't know how to do that. And so before South by Southwest, I knew that, I'm going to be a mentor there, and, there's all these people that are going to be there that are potential clients, but I had no idea how to connect with them. And so what was really powerful for me was, talking about what the needs were, you helping me come up with a strategy, executing that strategy, and then just seeing huge success with it, like just seeing it work almost immediately. And I think that's the thing about follow through. It's like, you can have a brilliant strategy, but if you don't actually go do it, right, it's not as brilliant as it could be. I mean, you don't see those outcomes. So I think for me, like, I had to commit to, like, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to invest in a business coach, then I'm going to do every single thing she tells me to do. And I'm going to do it full out 100%. and then we're going to see what happens, right? I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to be able to measure the success of the strategy based on the results that I get.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. One thing that you mentioned about, so you did have something that worked, and this I see a lot is that founders they'll say like you did, like I have referrals that work, but it's random and I don't really have a strategy. But if you take what works and then build a system around it, that can be really powerful. So what happened then? So you started executing, and then what happened?
So I started executing, and I was doing things that I thought I would never do. Like I thought I would never cold email. I thought I would never cold message anyone. I was very intimidated by it. And I didn't want to be seen as like this annoying person or whatever. And you really helped me like work through some of those mindset issues that like, listen, if like somebody, blocks you and tells you leave me alone, well, then they're obviously not your ideal client, right? And so it's okay. Like learn to just accept that there's going to be no's. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me is like, starting to implement strategies that I never thought I would. And really learning to navigate like the emotional parts of that and learning to cope with the no's or cope with the don't contact me anymore or whatever, because I'm also reaching people who are saying, yes, like this is exactly what I've been looking for, or I've never heard of this. Tell me more about it. And, those are the people that I'm sifting through all the no's and all the rejections to get to those people that are truly wanting what I have to offer. And so it's been a huge mindset shift for me in terms of like, I'm trying things now that I never thought I would try, because I had this idea about what that made me as a person, when really it's just a strategy. It's not about me. It's not a moral choice whether or not to cold email. Right. But I had to get through that kind of weird feeling, because you see like even on LinkedIn, you see people say, never send a cold email or DM again. And, there's just all these opinions about it. Right. But it's like when you can really just say, I'm just going to try it for myself and see if it works or not. Right. And you have somebody guiding you through that process. You're not just winging it. Like you were telling me exactly how to set up, a cold email campaign and what softwares to use and, what a cold email should look like and all these things. And then I had a lot of success with it because I went into South by Southwest having like a whole, filled days worth of meetings with folks, which I never had before. I'd never gone to a conference to speak and had like a plan other than hope somebody comes up and talks to me after I speak. Right.
Yeah.
And so I did have a lot of success with that.
Yeah. That was exciting. And look at like, I mean, you have a PhD, you have this in-depth, you're absolutely brilliant. You have this in-depth knowledge. And so doing that, like the outreach too, I mean, you're helping so many more people who would not have known about you before. And then, and so you have some people and you did you incorporated it. It's not like you just, outsource. I mean, outsourcing is great. I'm a fan of outsourcing and assistance help and automating processes, but I believe that you have to do it yourself first to see what works.
Yeah. Like I did it all myself and I thought it would be overwhelming, but it really wasn't, because you were kind of telling me like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And holding me accountable week after week, right? Like asking me like, okay, when are you going to do that? And, you were also available to answer questions. So it's like, I didn't feel like I was trying something new alone. I felt like I was trying something new with support, and I was able to do it myself, which is exciting, because I'm kind of an elder millennial. So like, I'm pretty good with tech, but it's like, it's gotten so advanced at this point with AI and all these automation systems that I'm just like, this is a whole new world. It feels like,
Right. Well, be careful, because I'm a Gen Xer, not a boomer. But as a Gen Xer, like I love tech. Like I've been spending pretty much all morning with Claude AI, and it could be a mindset more so than age. So I will just plug the oldies there.
Yeah, I mean, like it's definitely, it's like I've always felt like I was pretty good at tech, but there's just these new things that feel so overwhelming. But it's like when you have support to do it, then it takes kind of that overwhelming, fearful factor out of it.
Yeah. And I love it because now you're just like, when we touch base, you're like, okay, I'm doing this and then I'm doing a campaign around it and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
You got it. So you've pivoted, and I love this. I'd like to ask you about this because it's, it's so important to develop a niche, and not only to develop a niche that you have, because you started you do education, you started in education, you have deep experience with that, but then you also have to find where the market is, and not to be crass, but where the money is, because we're all in business, so this is about money too, so looking at not only what am I good at, what do I have in-depth experience at, but where is how do I mitigate seasonality, or how do I go to provide my value to clients that actually can pay for it. And anyway, I think, but what would you say about that?
So I started out doing burnout mitigation, particularly for K-12 schools. And I did that because that's what my background is. My background is in education. And like I was in that career for 12, 13 years. And so I felt very comfortable in that space. I felt like I understood at a very deep level all of the issues. And, I built my whole business around school districts and teachers. And I even wrote a book that was about teacher burnout. Right. And so I kind of niched myself to education. But what I found in education is because of the budget cycle, hiring and bringing on new vendors and all that happens in the spring. And then it's over kind of for a year, right? Because because of the way that their budgets work, because of state funding and grants and all those things, for the rest of the year, there's no contracts to be had, right? Because everything had to be budgeted for the year and, during that season. And so what I kind of found myself doing is like when I kind of got through my big, and everybody in education, they want the beginning of the year type stuff, right? They want summer and beginning of the school year. And then the rest of the year is just kind of like hit and miss, like I continue with executive coaching, but like the big programmatic parts of it, everybody wants that same time spot. And so it really limited how many clients I could have, because, my goal is to be able to give 100% to my clients. And that means I can only have a limited number of clients per month. And so once those spaces got filled, it was like, okay, well, this is what I can support for beginning of the year. And that's the time that most people wanted it. And so for the rest of the year, I kind of was like, just kind of being like, I feel I could be doing something else, right? I could be, yes, I'm engaging in building relationships and supporting the individual services and those things. But I just feel like there's more here. And then something else that happened was people started reading my book's called Thriving After Burnout, A Teacher's Compassionate Guide. Well, I started getting all these reviews on Amazon from people that weren't even in education, like someone in business, someone in the medical field saying, someone in, IT saying, wow, this book was really good. I'm not an educator, but I got so much value out of it. And that was because, maybe they knew someone that had read it that was an educator and they handed it off to them or whatever, And so, and then I also started getting requests from the private sector, from corporations and businesses and individuals that were outside of the education space. And I had just been saying, no, because again, like when you first get into business, you're trying to learn it and everyone tells you niche. And so I thought, okay, I'm niching to burnout in education. And so I'm going to say no to all these other things because I do burnout in education. And it's not because the work doesn't apply, because the research base that I use is from across all industries. It's not just education. In fact, very little of it is actually from education because we don't have that research. And so I finally started thinking, what if I didn't niche myself so far down to education? And I said, yeah, I'll work with, any kind of business who's looking for innovative, evidence-based solutions for burnout that support profitability. Because, the thing about burnout is like, the more of your employees become burned out, one of the symptoms is lack of effectiveness. So you become less and less effective as a company. And lack of effectiveness is going to impact profitability. And so I really started to think about like, how could I help more people by expanding the range of industries that I work with? And so that's where I've been this year, is like really looking at, I've stopped saying no. I've stopped saying no, and I've started saying yes, because science works for everyone and the science is the same. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned as I've started to work in other industries is that the problems are very similar. Mm-hmm. Whether we're working with kids and teachers, or we're working with adults in IT or in banking, it's all very similar. We're all dealing with clerical issues and email and trust, and just all kind of the same things pop up because we're all humans. And so that pivot it's been significant for me, because now, as the education cycle for procurement has kind of wound down, now I'm focusing on my corporate clients, right? And I have the whole year to work with them, versus in education, that very, beginning of the year period that everyone's so interested in.
It's just such a good example of niching. So you chose a niche, you did it, you went for it, and you still got other kinds of clients. It's so common to be afraid, like, well, but I can work with this person or this person. But if you niche, those other clients will still find you. They'll, you have to start somewhere. You have to start with the niche. I mean, you don't have to, but that's, there's a reason why people say that. I mean, the messaging does work, and other people will find you. So, okay, Jen, what would your advice be for people in a similar situation as to where you were several months ago, having this experience, thinking about quitting, knowing you had some success, not really knowing where to go, thinking about maybe going back to 9 to 5? What advice would you give to other new founders?
I think for me, it all comes back to investing in yourself. And I know that that's really scary when you're starting a business, because I've been there. And I've looked at, like, how do I keep my overhead the lowest possible? Because ultimately, if I can't be profitable, I have to feed my family. I have to buy toddler shoes, so I need this to be profitable. So the temptation is like, to not do anything that seems like it's optional. And I think business coaching is one of those things where it's just like, well, it's not a software that's required, right? It's not, my website or, my email system, or, it's not something that I could technically do business without. But I think like that whole thing people say about you have to spend money to make money, I think is like, it's like I've known that's true, but like taking the steps to make the investments was really hard in the beginning. And especially making an investment in business coaching is the biggest investment I ever made in my business, like in just like a one thing, and I had to really psych myself up to do it. But what I've seen is just this, even after, like now we're kind of intermittent. For a while we were like every week, right? And now we're intermittent. But what I've seen is that the coaching that I got back in February, March, April, and then this intermittent coaching I'm still implementing and I'm still getting the value out of that time, that investment that I made. Yeah. And I think, knowing like when to invest, I think is important. And I think for me, it was like, if I'm starting to think that I can't do this because of the business part, like I know I can do the content, I know I can do the consulting and the coaching and all those things. I'm confident in that. But I was feeling like I can't do this business part. And so I'm going to close my business, right? Like, I think that is like such a key moment to invest in coaching. Yeah. Invest in a solution, a group program, or some kind of education to like figure out, how do I figure out this part that's not working? Because I'm getting tempted to just throw it all away because of this one obstacle, right? And so for me, I've realized that when I get to that obstacle that I don't know how to overcome, when I get to that space where I can't sleep at night because I can't get to the solution of the problem in my business, I need to make an investment at that point. And I think that's the biggest, takeaway that I've had from this whole experience this past year is that I have to know strategically when to make that investment. And I have to be comfortable and know that, I may not, it may not be like, well, I put in 5,000 and I get back 10, it's not that kind of transaction, but I can see how my pipeline of clients has filled because of that investment that I made.
Yeah. And you did it. You did. Like I've made, because I built businesses and I can teach people how to build businesses, but I've never built an online business and coaching and consulting business. So I've hired coaches to help me, but early on, I would hire a coach and then I'd freak out. So I'd be like, I spent so much money, and I saw it as like spending money. But now for me, I'm doing it differently, and I invested in a coaching program and someone else's program. And this time I'm like, okay, this is an investment. Like I took a page from you, and I'm like, this is not like, an expense. Let's look at this as getting ROI from it and actually doing the things that he tells me to do.
Right. And I think that's so key. It's like there's all this, in the coaching world and online courses, there's all this data about how people buy a course and like this huge percentage, like never finish it. And it's like, okay, that is a waste of money. Like that is a bad investment, right? If you're not going to follow through, then that's not a quality investment. But if you're going to if this is someone that can help you, and you vetted them or you vetted the program and you can see the success that other clients are having, and you follow through with it, you're going to get results, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the most powerful things you asked me was, like, what does success look like in this coaching relationship? And for me, I remember like telling you, and you were like, that's it. It was like this very temporal goal, of just like, oh, if maybe I
remember what that was.
It was like, if I can just get, $3,000 clients, which is like, so yeah. I look at that now and I'm like, oh my gosh. And you were just kind of like, that's it. Then so you were like, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, that was I think it's easy to deliver.
Yeah. And you were like really challenged me to be like, well, what, like, how much further could we take that? Right. Yeah. And so I think for me, like, even just how you were so focused on like, what is the outcome I'm seeking? And like, how do we know if we're experiencing success? I think is so key. And I think that's something to look for. Like when you're going to work with a new coach or a new program, is like, are they really interested in what you're looking to achieve? Are they just really focused on what they can provide? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. Yes, absolutely. Because I hear like one of the catchphrases now with coaches is blueprint. Like, I'm going to give you this blueprint. I'm going to give you that blueprint. But, I like to, that's why I have that initial intake, those questionnaires, because people look back at that, months, years later. And it's like, that's really the blueprint, is what you want out of your life. Because otherwise, you're an entrepreneur. Like what, that's what it's for, is to building a different kind of a life. And then you use the systems and tools and techniques. But yeah, it's really what you want. That's the blueprint.
Right. And I think the key also is to understand, like, when someone says coach, what do they mean by that? Because I remember one of the things I said in my LinkedIn post was like, I'm not looking for someone to ask me how to solve the problem. You know what I'm saying? Like the very Socratic coaching method, where it's like, I'm going to just continue to ask you questions and you'll find the answer deep in your soul. Like you'll figure out the strategy, within yourself. Like that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for that kind of coach. Like if I could search deep down in my soul to figure out, how to do cold emailing, then I would do it, right? I wouldn't hire someone to help me. So
that's why I changed my, so if you notice, like I switched to, because I've always been like coach and consultant. Now I'm like, okay, now I'm focusing more on the consultant. I've been trained as a life coach and all that stuff, but consultant, I do find that clients love it when I'm like, okay, this is what you do.
Right. And I think that's like, I think it's like some people call themselves a coach, but what they're really doing is like mentoring and consulting. And so like, that's the kind of person you want to find, right? Not someone that is going to help you find the answers within yourself. I mean, if that's what you're seeking, then of course go to someone like that. But also if that's not what you're seeking, if you're looking for someone to like, know the strategy and tell you the strategy to do, then make sure that you're going to a person for help that actually uses that type of that kind of, what am I trying to say? Like they use that type of method.
Yeah. And it's, and so I'm, so I do, and sometimes with my clients, it is that coaching approach. And that's why I'll do a little me plug, because having someone experienced who's,
Mhm.
like, it's like I've done all this stuff, like I've built these businesses, and I also have been, do have that training, the coaching training as well. Because sometimes that is, people are like, sometimes like, I just need to vent and I need to talk
Yeah.
to somebody, or you use a sounding board or things like that.
Mhm.
But the consulting is really fun when you can see specific results,
Mhm.
and that's really awesome. So, okay, so how, and you wrote a book and you're offering your amazing burnout services to business. You say it in your words. How do people get in touch with you? How do people learn about how to work with you?
Yeah. So you can just message me on LinkedIn. I'm on here regularly. You can also email me at jen@jenjohnsonconsulting.com. I'm currently revamping my website. So it's just an under construction. So that's not helpful, but I do have materials that I can send to folks if they're interested in working with me, if they'll just reach out through LinkedIn, connect on LinkedIn, or just email me.
And great example of going for it and not waiting until your website's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, like and the thing is, I finally, this is the first website I've not made myself, and I wanted it to be really high quality and professional, and so that's something that I invested in to hire somebody to do for me. But if you hire someone that's very high quality, it takes quite a long time to actually, get your website, because she's interviewing me about strategy and about she's developing an entire, she's kind of rebranding what I've done, because I knew what I did was adequate, but I want it to be a high level of professionalism. And so that's working. And then I also have a free webinar that's coming up on September 28th at 11 Central. Just to for folks to kind of get an idea of, like, maybe they know that employees are experiencing burnout, but they don't really know the next step. And so what we're really going to be talking about in that webinar, and it's free, is just like, how do I find the next step in navigating burnout with my employees?
Well, put that in the link. I'm still kind of new to LinkedIn Live, so I'm going to look real quick and see if I can tell if anybody is asking questions. But so after this is going to be up on my LinkedIn, you'll be able to share it too. And we'll both go back in and see if anybody has questions or comments. And then if you could put your link in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put that in. There's just a one-page registration that just sends you the link.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, let me see. I know I borrowed my script from my coach.
That's the beauty of coaching.
That was good, huh? Yeah, it was good. Okay. Okay. If you could use one word to describe your experience so far with coaching and your progress with coaching, what would that word be? Totally putting you on the spot. I did not ask you this earlier.
I think the word I would use is confidence, because for me, it's about the strategy, but it's also about being able to sleep at night. And it's about, like, feeling confident, right? And what I'm in the business side of the business. And for me, the reason I even sought out the coaching in the first place was like an emotional distress I was feeling, right? About, I don't know where this is going, and I don't know how to do this, and I don't know how to replicate this. And so for me, like, I now have, like, a confidence that I know where my clients are coming from. I know what the pipeline is. I know how to find them. I know how to help them find me. And so I think my experience can be just summed up in that I now have confidence in being able to run this part of my business. And of course, I'm continuing to grow and learn new things and try new things. But I really have a set of strategies now that I feel confident in. And I think that's everything. It's like, you can have the best strategy, but if you don't feel confident in it, you still feel miserable. And so for me, it's like, I wanted to get to an emotional space where I could just feel at peace with that part of my business.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a seat on your bus or rocket ship or whatever.
I love to have a seat on yours as well. I watch, it's funny because, like, I've had all this one-on-one coaching with you, but every time you do a video or post anything, I read it every time, because I know, like, you're just full of incredible information and strategy. So I'm always, even if it's, you're working particularly with recruiting now, but it's like, that stuff applies to everybody. So even if you're not in recruiting, you should be reading everything that Diane posts, because I get something out of it every time.
Good. Awesome. Yeah. I like seeing that my experience is put to use and helping other founders. I believe so strongly in entrepreneurship and and that living that life. So anyway, Jen, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. And I'm going to end the live now. And everybody, let Jen know. Let me know if you have any questions or want to connect with us following this live.